Social media. A lot of people have what looks like a perfect life, but we often forget that what is behind the photo can sometimes be a very different story. And for me, my life was a carefully curated selection of images on Instagram, and behind the scenes, I was surviving abuse. So why talk about this? For me, the most important messages I want to put out there is that you never know what someone's going through. So if you can, and you have the capacity to do so, do try and carry kindness in all that you do. I know sometimes life gets difficult and you just want to hide and be in hermit mode and just you want to preserve your energy, and that's okay too. But where you can, just remember that you never know what someone's going through, and if you can, carry that empathy and kindness and make the world feel a bit more human again. But that being said, there's also the other side to it that I was often told, I didn't realise you were going through that, or I had no idea. As well as, I knew that it was probably difficult, but you seem to be handling it so well. And for me, I think there's a few aspects to this that I really want to emphasise to, even if it is just one individual watching this, is the fact that just because someone carries something well does not remove the fact it's heavy, as well as the fact that just because someone doesn't look like what they've been through does not remove the fact they've been through it. Right? There's different elements to abuse survival and claiming back your power and your autonomy and trying to live life for yourself. And part of that is not letting abuse, trauma, or whatever it is that someone may have gone through define you. Because I feel like when you do want to feel pretty again, when you want to feel like you look good and that life just feels happy, that is a form of reclaiming your power and not letting someone else define your life. And I often get told this where, especially as I've developed different ways of feeling like myself and feeling happy again, where people go, oh, I would have never thought that. And when I do open up about it, people get really confused because they assume that, life must be so great since I'm so positive. But it's my choice. It's almost my rebellion to fight back and be like, no, I'm not going to let someone else dictate my happiness. And that doesn't change the fact that there have been days where I have been so broken and days where I have felt like the world's weight was just too much. But that being said, again, I feel like social media is a big part of this. And an element that I also want to get to people is that we probably need to shift the way we view social media. If we looked at social media as if it was someone's individual art gallery, you're walking down the street and you see someone's art gallery on show, you wouldn't sit there and think, oh, that's their entire life. You'd just be like, oh, this is a nice selection of art pieces and I really see the message they're trying to get through. And I think that's what people need to do when they're viewing someone's social media. It is a carefully curated, sometimes not careful, but it's someone's way of expressing themselves. And if they want to express their art in sculpture, that's their choice. If they want to do it in photography, that's their choice. If they want to do it through music, through painting, you don't question that. And I feel if we shifted our views from this is someone's exact life to this is their art exhibition, I feel like social media and the mindset around it would be a much healthier place to be. I've done a lot of contemplation on how I want to move forward with opening up about my story, because there are so many different layers to trauma and abuse that you don't really know where to start and where is a good start point. Obviously I could talk about from day one of my birth and really go through every day of my life, but I won't really remember all the details straight off the bat. But today I feel like starting with what people see on social media versus what happens behind every photo is a very good place. And for me, it's a case that, so at 19, I was in a relationship and I really thought it was love as you do at that age. You are young, you're naive, you want to believe in love, especially if you're a literature nerdy girl like I was. I fell in love with the idea of love, and I still do. I'm such a hopeless romantic, but I think like William Blake's poetry, you have songs of innocence and songs of experience. And at that point, I was very much in my lens of innocence and rose-tinted goggles were on. And so there was an aspect of choice that was taken away from me when it came to protection, and I fell pregnant. And long story short, I'll open up about that specifically maybe at another time, but I was left alone, and I was facing, from that point onward, life as a single mother. And I decided, despite whatever trauma I may have undertaken at that point in my life, I was going to go to university and prove to myself, prove to anyone else that may have gone through something that did traumatise them, but also had this responsibility of life in their hands as I did, that does not have to define your story. And obviously, having children, especially so young, does change the course of your life, and you are responsible for someone's existence. And it's a very big responsibility. But I also wanted to highlight the fact that this was not going to ruin my life, as I was told, and it was not going to make a negative impact on me. That doesn't take away from the fact that the challenge of being a young mum and going to university was there, because the challenge was most certainly there and still is. I feel when you are responsible for anyone's life, whether that is a child of yours or an adult or someone that you care about, that's never going to go away. I have friends who have been carers for their disabled parents. I have met people who they'd taken in their siblings because their parents weren't able to. And regardless of whatever responsibility you take on, the burden of being responsible for someone else's life is never going to go away, especially when you do care about how their life is. So, besides the point, on social media it looked great. It looked like I started this beautiful journey, which I did. It was a gorgeous place to be. But the adjustment from the beginning of just having twins and adjusting to motherhood, then making that jump to going to university, was very difficult. I had a lot of emotional breakdowns. I found it very challenging. But when I did stabilise and a routine was formulated, things felt good. I felt like I could juggle this. And then at university, I met my ex-fiancé, who, in the beginning, it felt like a dream come true. It was very much the story of love that I had anticipated, that, you know, he was willing to accept the fact that I already had kids, and he was just charming. And there was loads of good things that at least I thought were good that very much seemed appealing to me. He was so good with the kids that I cannot take away. I waited a long time before I introduced them, but when I did, he was really good with them, and that made it all the more easier for me to fall in love with him. But that being said, I also missed the red flags, and a lot of these red flags, because I was busy. I didn't have the conventional university experience where I was at university and I was able to witness someone's behaviour 24/7. I was half there, half not there, because I had my outside of university work commitments. But I also made the decision to start working, especially my third year. So during my final year, I stood as a political paper candidate, which basically means that I was not going to win, but I was going to be able to build up some experience. And I just thought, you know what, a bit of life experience is always interesting. I don't really know how the whole system works with local candidates, and it'd just be nice to see it firsthand. Then obviously I was doing my dissertation at university and working, as well as driving up and down the country full time. I also found out I was pregnant. And behind the scenes of all of that, I was going through what was quite a toxic relationship. And in my head, I did not view it like that at the time, because in my head, I was looking at all of these commitment podcasts about how, you know, every relationship has its challenges and you're supposed to put the work in together to really build up. Except what I was failing to see is the only one really making the effort was me. And that it was always a case of he would mess up and he would do something bad, he would do something toxic, and I was the one dealing with the consequences of that. Beyond that, it was a horrible cycle of stonewalling, gaslighting, manipulation, love bombing, future faking. And for those of you that are unaware of what all of these things mean, love bombing is literally just love bombing. So anything that would make someone feel like they're in love. And what that does is, hormonally, on a scientific level, it puts your hormones so up high that it's almost as addictive as drugs. You have this love high. And then what they do afterwards is they stonewall you, and that just basically means they go stone cold, they ignore you, and they drop you. So it does actually end up being almost like a drug addiction, because you're up and down, you're up and down, up and down. Beyond that, there's something called future faking, which a lot of women especially suffer, where someone will turn around and be like, I know I messed up, but in the future it's going to be so good, it's going to be so amazing, think about our future, think about the kids' future. And so you end up being in this very toxic cycle of manipulation where you don't even have a minute to stop and think for yourself. And because I was also that busy, I did not have a minute to reflect upon other red flags and other things that others could clearly see. There were plenty of cheating rumours, but I was none the wiser, because the friends and the people that we had around our life, he had isolated me from my friends, but the ones that were left over, all of his friends. And he had been lying to his friends about the narrative, basically saying that everything toxic he was doing, I was doing. And to me, he was saying all of his friends hated me. And I was basically left feeling like I was unattractive, no one liked me, and it's this phasing stage that abusers do when they isolate you from your friends. But what's worse is they will do certain things that make you feel like you're the bad guy. So I sat there trying to improve myself for my partner, to be like, I want to be the best partner, I want to be the best mother, I want to be the best member of society that I can be. Not seeing that they were doing everything to be the complete opposite to that. Obviously, now you have some context and background, you're able to get the fact that on social media it might have looked like one thing, but the reality behind these photos was very different.
The number of people that saw this photo of me at 10 Downing Street thinking life must be such a dream were very unaware of the fact that the night before my ex tried to drive me off a bridge, very much with the mindset that if he can't have me, no one else can. And he tried to coerce me into eloping with him just so that he could keep me. That is abuse and manipulation at its finest. And why would you stay with someone like that?
Because for a long time I felt like I was very lucky that someone would even want to date me with kids. But he weaponised that and used that against me as well. So whenever I did feel like leaving, he would turn around and say things like, well, who else would take you in with kids? And I believed it. And part of that is my own thoughts as well as society. And the more research and depth I take into seeing how bad misogyny is in society, the more I realise that it's not just our society now, it's generational, it's historic. That women are always left with that responsibility of family and made to feel like these beautiful blessings that are children, they are not easy, but it's the same as businesses are not easy. Anything that is successful is not easy. But women are always made to feel like children are baggage and that it's a bad thing, when in actual fact, my point of view now is that if anyone gets to walk into my life and my children's life, they are lucky, because that means it is the biggest honour and showcase of trust that I could give them. And at the time, I was still younger and more naive, where I had that lens where I was like, someone's coming into my life and I feel so lucky and honoured. But actually now, I know after doing research on all levels, they would be the lucky ones. And unfortunately, my ex misused that honour and really manipulated me and made it very toxic. But again, on social media and on all our stories, it looked really lovey-dovey. Which further adds to the humiliation that follows afterwards, because to turn around afterwards and admit that something was wrong is really challenging. And I think I went into a massive hermit mode for a long time because I didn't know how to digest that what had happened to me had happened to me. And, you know, I just sat there realising the truth behind everything was that I was being cheated on, I was being coerced, abused, manipulated, and I didn't want to accept that that had happened. I was in denial almost. He made me feel like I was unworthy, that I was lucky that he even tolerated me. And part of that as well is the fact that I was anchor babied. I very much made it clear that I did not want to have a baby until we were married, until I'd finished university. So finding out about the new pregnancy was very challenging for me. And I remember the way that he would go about it was when he told his parents, he was like, we're going to tell them it was an accident, that's what I've told them. And I was like, is it not? It is an accident. He was like, exactly, good girl, perfect vibe. And I just remember reflecting on that moment and remembering how much he wanted to have a baby and how much he wanted to marry me. And part of especially narcissistic abuse, but any type of controlling dynamic, is how quickly someone wants to move. And I'm not saying that moving quickly when you're genuinely in love is a bad thing. I remember a beautiful lesbian couple that I'd met, and they've gone through IVF and had a baby in the same hospital that I did when I had the twins. And they got married within the first 2 weeks they met, and they've been married, I can't remember, but I think it was like 17 years or so. And they are lovely. They are so loved up as they probably would have been when they first met, and their story is so beautiful. So I'm not taking away from the fact that there are success stories from that, but for me, I thought that was the case, and I realised that he was moving that quickly to try and grasp me. And when we found out about the baby, I remember it was almost this case of like, I can breathe. And his behaviour just deteriorated from there. It got worse. Like, his worst behaviour was after I was pregnant. And I think that's because he felt at liberty because he'd almost locked me in. And I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking that when you have a baby, it's going to stop someone from leaving. And the narrative in society, and I'm so happy to see this change, is that historically it would be, a woman's anchor babying a man. But now it's a case that I think a lot of people have recognised men want women pregnant so they don't leave, or they've marked their territory, which again highlights the misogyny that we still live in today. But for me, it was a case that it made it harder, and I did stay for longer because of the pregnancy, because I felt embarrassed and I didn't want to turn around and have a broken family. And there was a lot of manipulation surrounding the family dynamic that had happened too. But when I decided enough is enough, I stood up and left. But again, social media was actually used as a weapon against me in that situation too, because he would make all these grandiose posts about how family is important, everyone's chasing clout, but what's so important is a family unit. And he would post pictures of us and our family, and it very much weighed on me and made me feel like I had this obligation to stay to prove him right, when I realised that actually I have an obligation to myself and my children to live a happy life away from social media. And I like pretty pictures. I think social media is an art exhibition, as I've highlighted earlier in the video. But that being said, there is no obligation to live up to some standard or some perfect life. Ooh, Bubby's waking up from his nap. Behind the pretty pictures, I was surviving abuse, and I know I'm not the only one. As well as women, there's also men that go through abuse as well, and the amount of men that have opened up to me about their abuse story, and some go as far back as their early childhood, it's astonishing to know how many people don't feel safe to just speak with even people they know they can trust because of how heavy it feels, that they don't want to put that on someone else. And yeah, it's just, I know I'm not the only one, and I really want people to feel that they don't have to be alone. If you have experienced toxicity or abuse or some form of trauma, just know that you are not alone. Moreover, you never have to feel lucky that someone tolerates you, because the right people in your life won't feel like they have a burden of you in their life. They're going to feel happy to have you around. And the most important thing that you can do is focus on bettering yourself and your situation and finding where feels like home to you. Dressing in ways that make you feel happy again, surviving in style, and reclaiming your power, whether that's pretty pictures on social media or finding new hobbies and ways to express yourself. Whatever it is for you, don't feel guilty for reclaiming your power. It's a form of self-expression and reclamation of your internal happiness. Remember, you can always transmute pain into power for your happiness and your story. And as long as everyone in the world tries to do everything through kindness, not to hurt others, and all with good intentions, I do believe that we are going to have such a beautiful place to be one day. So yeah, I'm just a believer in everything turning out really good and power of positivity, because at the end of the day, I feel like the frequency you emit does ripple out, and if everyone starts trying to vibrate on that level, things are going to be good.